during the national movement in Europe in the 19th century, also the Finnish people, the Finnish elite was kind of looking for their identity. And there is this famous saying that goes, somebody said, "We are not Swedish, we are not Russian, let us be Finnish." And they built their own identity, and a large part of the elites also changed their names from Swedish to Finnish. I'm Eeva Sippola. I'm the professor of post-colonial studies at the University of Bremen in Germany. But I grew up in Finland. I'm Finnish, I'm from Finland, and I'm a native Finnish speaker. In a Finnish-speaking family in Finland. And at school, on the 3rd grade, I started learning my first non-native language, so to say, a foreign language, which was actually not a foreign language because it was the second official language of Finland, namely Swedish. So I started with Swedish on the 3rd grade. Later on in the 7th grade, I got introduced to English, and then I got very interested in languages, and on the 8th grade I chose French because I wanted to learn a little bit about different cultures and languages. Later on in the high school, I got interested in Spanish, and I also learned Spanish. And later on, when looking at variation in the Spanish-speaking world, in Latin America, also elsewhere, I found out that there is a Creole language with a Spanish lexical base called Chabacano, spoken in the Philippines. And that's what I did my master's thesis on. And then I continued to a dissertation and PhD studies in Hispanic linguistics. Besides my academic studies in Creole studies and in Hispanic linguistics, I also spent a couple of years promoting Finnish education system in the Spanish-speaking world. So I worked as an education coordinator and specialist at the Finnish Institute in Madrid, telling about the success story of Finnish education. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Finland and the Finnish language in connection to the country, and especially with regard to the other languages that have been present here, because Finland used to be part of Sweden from the Middle Ages onwards, and then in the beginning of the 19th century, we became a part of Russia. So Finland has been in between two empires, Sweden, that is a Nordic empire, and then the Russian Empire for centuries. And the Finnish elites in the early times, they used to speak Swedish. If we think about the history of the Finnish language, the first Bible translation, the first written texts that we have in Finnish are from the 16th century. And actually the first Finnish novel that you see here on the background by Aleksis Kivi, it's called Seitsemän veljestä, Seven Brothers, is only from 1870, so 150 years ago. The first novel in Finnish was written and published. And the book is very interesting because it tells a typical story from a Finnish perspective. It's the story of seven orphan brothers that are living in a village, in a Finnish village, and they do not know how to read or write. And in order to get a confirmation by the church and get married, get the permission to get married, they have to learn to read and write. And they are struggling with those skills. And the book, the first novel in Finnish, tells the story of these seven brothers and the struggles they encounter with the society, with learning to read and write, and with their teachers. But finally, they acquire those skills after some adventures and live happily ever after in that home. And it kind of connects also to the history of the Finnish language, because it very well tells the situation at that time in Finland in the 19th century. At that time, Swedish was the language of the administration and also used by the elites in Finland, and most of the population, the majority of the population, was actually speaking Finnish, but were not able to use that in official situations or contexts. The Finnish language became more official with the national awakening throughout the 19th century. a group of intellectuals that actually were Swedish speakers from the beginning decided to work on the development of the Finnish written language and its standardization. So they invented new vocabulary for Finnish language that could be used to express the same official concepts that were normally expressed in Swedish at that time. And later on, actually, Finland only became an independent nation in 1917. So this year we are celebrating the 100 years of the Finnish independence. That was kind of the culmination of all this development, which went hand in hand with the Finnish language. And I have an example from my family history. My grandfather's parents, they were actually Swedish speakers, but they decided to speak only Finnish to their children. They also changed their family name. It used to be Lilius, a Swedish name, to a Finnish name, which now is Listo. So that's a good example. And my grandfather grew up speaking Finnish and never actually learned Swedish very well because of the family background. Today, Finland has two official languages, Finnish and Swedish, and the great majority of the population is Finnish speaking. So almost 5 million of the 5.5 million inhabitants in Finland are actually Finnish speakers, quite monolingual. Some of them are also use Swedish in their daily lives. And we have a small minority, historical minority, that also uses Swedish as a home language. And these two languages are the official languages, and each community, each municipality is either Finnish-speaking, Swedish-speaking, or bilingual. And this means that the people of those municipalities can use these languages in all the official situations. In the education system, this means that, for example, I grew up in a Finnish community, so I went to school in Finnish, but 30 kilometers from my hometown, there goes the language border, and on the other side of the language border, what we call, so to say, there are completely Swedish-speaking communities, and then schools are normally in Swedish. So the language of instructions depends normally on your home language. And throughout your school years, you then get introduced to the other official language at school, but not as a medium of instruction, but as a kind of foreign language, although it's the other Finnish language, other official language that you are learning at school. The degree of bilingualism between Finnish and Swedish depends very much on where you come from in Finland, and what kind of education you have. Normally in the big cities, in the south, in Helsinki, in Turku, also on the coast, in Vaasa, for example, where you have traditional Swedish minorities, people have better skills in Swedish as well, if they happen to be Finnish speakers. Everybody has to learn at least 3 years of Swedish at school. And of course, not everybody gets very fluent with only 3 years of education. But if you receive university education, you have to pass a Swedish exam at the end of, before getting your master's degree. And this is stipulated in the language regulations because we want to guarantee that everybody has the right to use their own mother tongue in official contexts. So if I, for example, would work at, if I work at the University of Helsinki teaching, and I'm a Finnish-speaking teacher, and I give my courses in Finnish, I still will have to accept examinations in Swedish from the students because the university is bilingual, and we want to guarantee the right of the minorities also to use their native tongue in contexts like university education. So Finland has done very well in these education rankings, in PISA testing, for example, in recent years, and I think that's clearly connected to our education system and the use of the mother tongue in the early grades and throughout the education. So the use of Finnish is clearly connected to the way that kids learn to think and solve problems from very early on. The Finnish education system was reformed in the 1970s to make it equal and public for the whole population. So we got general education that was supposed or is supposed to be exactly the same for everybody. You can live in northern Finland in sparsely populated areas, but you should still receive the same quality education that you receive in the capital. And that's one of the factors that makes the Finnish education so good in international comparison. I think the keys to the success of the Finnish education are that it's public, that the teachers are highly educated, and that we give a lot of freedom and independence to the educators themselves. So the central administration for the Finnish education system trusts the professionals who are teaching at schools and who are actually in touch with the children in their daily lives. The relationships between Finnish speakers and Swedish speakers are sometimes quite problematic, because the great majority of the population of Finland is Finnish speaking and has to learn Swedish at school. And it's not always a useful language in your everyday life if you happen to live in a part of Finland that doesn't really, Swedish is not present there in everyday communication. Swedish is respected as a language of the Nordic cooperation, for example, and for historical reasons, but there are also some political parties that would like to get rid of the official status of Swedish. From the point of view of the Swedish speakers, they are a very small minority, so they are afraid of losing their language. Normally if you marry a Finnish speaker and Finnish is all around you in the society, you have to work hard to maintain the home language, which is Swedish in those cases, and promote it and choose the Swedish school for your kids so that they could use Swedish at all domains of everyday life and the society. I think when thinking about the future, the Swedish language is very well protected by laws in Finland, and I personally hope that will not change. I think it's important that we train everybody to understand the strength in the plurality in different languages in a bilingual, up to some degree, bilingual society. So I hope we will be able to maintain this quite uneven bilingualism and two official languages. I think it's a strength for the Finnish society and the state in general. I think it's really exciting when we compare Finland and Haiti. If we look at Finland 200 years ago, the situation was not that different. There was a large population using a language that was not used that much in official contexts or by the elites, but that can be changed very quickly, even in a couple of decades, if there is a strong enough group of people who are advocating the language, who are educating others about the benefits of using your own mother tongue, for example, in education. When thinking about how to use languages in education, we know from several studies around the world, also from Finland and other places, that the best way to learn to read and write and to get the basics for problem solving is to use your mother tongue in education, especially in the early grades. Once you have mastered those skills in your mother tongue, you can move on to learn any other language and broaden your horizons and your skills from Spanish to French or even to Chinese. Or last of all, I would like to say to everybody, tervetuloa Suomeen. Welcome to Finland. We would be very happy to show what we have done and also the benefits and lessons learned from the Finnish education experiences in the past years.